All right, let's open with prayer then. Father in heaven and dear Jesus, we thank you again for this few moments together. As we look at a few things right now, we do ask that you would help our minds to comprehend it. Thank you again for your watch care in our lives. We ask these things and thank you now. Amen. Okay, yesterday we started with these pictures. Now, I was asked kind of to scale this thing down into a little bitty garden. Sometimes that's kind of difficult for me to do because I've been so involved with so much for so many years, and I haven't been gardening on a little small scale. And what I'm sharing, what I did on a larger scale, you can actually take the principles or the concepts and bring it down to a smaller scale, depending on what you have. If you have just a plot to work with, you can still use these concepts of what you can do. Like when we looked at that picture there. That picture there shows you what we were doing, and by the time you look at that picture, you can see that you've got an abundance. Now, in that picture there, I may have that whole row of the same kind of food stuff, all right? But you may take whatever your garden is, because you're not going to near need the amount of food that I was producing, but you can take the idea about building beds like this, like I was showing you in those earlier pictures of that. You can actually do that on a smaller scale in a garden, to where you take whatever your length of your garden is and break it up in pieces. That bed may be 10 feet and may be 5 foot, and you may plant a 5-foot piece of that bed in whatever you are wanting to grow, And then you can grow a lot of food in a very small plot. And it's amazing what you can do on a smaller scale. Now, I'm just showing you a larger scale because that's all I can relate to, because that's what I've been doing. But the facts are still the same. You can take these concepts and you can put it into action of what you're doing in your home garden, whatever size it is. All right. Those were the high tunnels. This one you see over here with that vent in it right there, that was a heated high tunnel or a greenhouse. And the reason why I'm sharing these with you is not that you need to have that amount of greenhouses or high tunnels. Is that every one of us that are gardening, whether you're on a larger scale or a smaller scale, I recommend that every home has at least a high tunnel one. At least one high tunnel. And especially as you all live up here in this northern climate, you can take a high tunnel and you can actually extend your season 2 months in the front and 2 months on the end. That's phenomenal. That's amazing. And in fact, in most areas, if you become acquainted with it and you become aggressive with it, we had food in these high tunnels year-round. Eventually, we're going to get to a picture, I believe, in here that shows you a December harvest. And the December harvest was predominantly coming out of a high tunnel production. Because in December, you're not going to be outside working because the weather drops so cold, then not too many plants are going to live and survive and want to thrive. So you've got to take high tunnels, and what it does is, if you see here in this high tunnel, the various different ones, this one over here, the bigger one that you can't see at all, it's that one there. That had a double covering on it. You know how many miles that moved me south from my climate? Each covering moves me 500 miles. Each covering, and I had a double cover, so it actually moved me 1,000 miles south. That put me in Florida. You get your head wrapped around that. What you can do with Florida weather in December and January is amazing. So my encouragement to any one of you, if you've got some means, even if it's little, start investing in a tunnel. You don't need great big ones. You just need a nice little small one. Right now, I think there's a picture here somewhere. Oops. Not go there. The one I have right now on our place, because the pictures you see here is in the farm that I just sold. And because I retired and I didn't want to be there anymore, because if I'm being there, I want to be doing it. You follow what I'm saying? And I've had 30, 35, or 38 years of this. And so I finally said, I'm going to go back to the land. I'm going to homestead. I'm going to enjoy it. If I want to sit on the porch, I'm going to sit on the porch and don't bother me. You know what I mean? So what you're seeing here is when we were in full-fledged production, and it's only to encourage you to show you what you can do. Now, the high tunnel I have on our place right now is 40 foot by 20, and that's a teeny little house. That's a small house. But you cannot believe the amount of food that I can grow in that little house year-round. We have everything we need coming out of that one little house for salad materials. You know, and you can just go on and on. We were eating tomatoes up in December. So, I just want to encourage you. Now, I'll just have to get through these slides because, well, we're gonna look. Of course, these are on a bigger scale, but you can take the same concepts and bring it down into a smaller scale, and that's what I'm basically trying to encourage you to see. Okay. The covering is it's a greenhouse plastic. It's a 6 mil plastic. It will last 8 to 10 years. All right? And that plastic will last a long time. In fact, it'll last longer than that. But those are your good UV periods. Now, each one of these coverings, as you see on this bigger house, you can kind of see it. It's got a double cover. It's got an inner cover and it's got an outer cover, and it has a little, we call them squirrel fans. Little fans, one at that end, and there's one on the other side on this end, and it's blowing air into it, and it builds a pocket. It blows it up like a balloon all the way over that. Now, the amazing thing of it is each one of these coverings, this plastic here and this plastic here, moves me 1,000 miles south. With the air pocket. Well, when you buy the kit, the plastic comes with it. Well, the snow load's great. Now, one of the things you can't see, let me, I don't know if I have a picture of it or not. There's different styles. Now, this one out here is called a Quonset style. The big one you see out here in the field. It's kind of like some of these. These are some of my earlier ones. They're a Quonset. You can't see over here because it's covered. And this one here, these are my newer ones. They were what were called a Gothic style. It comes up and it runs like this and comes to a peak. All right? And when you get snow load on it, that thing just gets amazing. It will not, you can nearly park a helicopter on these things. They're so strong, they will take an amazing amount of load. from snow and ice. Now, the Quonset style, now I haven't been out here to look at this house that much. I've seen it from the distance, but you just can't see it. Another house that I had that was in this one's same space was a Quonset style. Now, the wider you get, the more flat it tends to get on the top. Now, we had a winter, and this was on a Sabbath. We do a home church. And that morning I got up just like I normally do. I was going to go out and check on the plants and see how they were doing or whatever. And when I got out there, our home sets about right over here, like this, in that picture, back over here. And that's where I was walking. I was going back up to the house. And I walked out on the back porch and looked out over the garage, which is here, and then the house, and that crest of that big house was gone. And I went like, uh-oh. We had a heavy snow that melted and turned to ice, and then it snowed again 4 or 6 inches, and that house collapsed. The Quonsets are not my favorite house. I like the Gothic. Well, if you go out and look at theirs out here across the road, you'll see that's a Quonset. But the thing that's nice about theirs, now what's that? Well, you have to have them engineered properly, depending on your areas, okay? That's a Quonset and that's a Quonset. These here two are Gothics. All right? These were the first 2 that I actually started with. And then as I grew and was developing more and more market, I went into the larger scale. And because in a market gardening, you want to get your produce there the earliest, because you get your ultimate dollar out of those early products. All right? And that's what just kept forcing me, and the temptation to get bigger and bigger is very real. All right? And I had to discipline myself, which is very hard to do. And so that's what happened, is I just kept growing, and I just kept getting. In fact, right here where you're seeing this empty space, if I would have stayed there, there would have been another one of these sitting there. But I just got to the place where I said, no, I'm done. And anyways, I just wanted to show you a few pictures. The importance of these high tunnels, and I started to mention to you until I got sidetracked, is those 2 coverings set you 1,000 miles from me, would be down near Florida. Then you get an air pocket like I have the big one. That air pocket moves you about another 400 and something miles. So we're looking at about 1,400 miles, and it actually set the inside growing ability way down there, almost in the Keys of Florida. That was a very good growing season. So you don't have to have that. But my recommendation, if you're in a northern climate, you've got to have, the more protection, the better, is all I'm saying. It will come. Depending on the company you're going to buy through, you tell them what you're looking for, and they'll put the kit together for you. All right? And sometimes they even have the guys that'll come from the company to your place and put it up. All right? But you want to tell them what you want. If you want just a high tunnel with a single covering, that's exactly what they're going to do. If you want a high tunnel with a double covering, that's what they're going to do. My recommendation is where I'm at. Where I'm at personally, I went to it's a 20-foot wide, all right, and it's 40-foot long. And I'm not kidding you. I believe I have a picture in here, but we're not getting to it yet. Five. Yeah. Well, we're actually right on 4 and 5. We're right in that area. It's kind of a... No, I don't know what zone y'all are up in here. Do you know? Okay. Yeah, see, I'm right on 5 and 4, so we're definitely in a lot warmer climate than you. Now, I can go north of there, and it starts changing. Even though I'm in the south, per se, in the east, it's just that northern, as you go further northern, as the sun drops way down here in the winter months, that's where your difficulty is, and that's why you're wanting here that better protection for your winter harvest, your winter growing. And that's on a bigger scale or on a smaller scale? Yes. Anytime you put a pocket of air between something, it really is amazing, because that cold air that hits that first plastic, that first covering, has to work its way through that insulation, that air insulation. And then once it gets through that air insulation, then it's got that second covering to deal with. And it's amazing. You know, of course, in that house, I had a thermostat heating system in the whole 9 yards. But, you know, I'm not saying that's what you need to do. I'm just saying if you're going to look at a high tunnel, you can get a high tunnel. Even if you could just get a high tunnel with a single covering, it's going to be a much better situation for food production, because, and I didn't bring any of that because I didn't intend to go into a lot about high tunnels, but I can see you have an interest in it. You actually can go inside your high tunnels in what we call a wire hoop. When you have these beds that you built inside, just like you saw in my fields, they're in there. There's these little wire hoops that you can stick in the ground at wire hoops over that bed, and you have what's called agribon. It's a cloth material that breathes. You can put that over inside, and I used to have pictures until my computer went down and destroyed everything, that showed me actually taking this agribon off, and all these baby lettuces and all these baby greens and all these beets and all these carrots. We were up in December. I mean, in December in our area, we're already dropping off pretty heavy. All right? But we still had beautiful production, because I was covering them and uncovering them, covering them and uncovering them during those colder months. We actually ate carrots until May and June from that planting in November. We were eating beets, we were eating kale, we were eating spinach, you know, inside one of these big tunnels here. All right? And we had more food than we know what to do with. Let me get to you next. Just like that. You see that? There, you know, yeah. Okay. Now, wow, I can see where y'all's interest is, and that's a good thing. What she was saying is, if you had like a grow bed, a grow box, you know, I don't grow in boxes. I don't like them for various different reasons, but for those that do like them, go for it. You can take that grow box and turn it into a greenhouse. You can turn it into a high tunnel by putting PVC tubing bolted with a clamp onto the side of your box every 2 feet. And you can take whatever size of PVC pipe you want, and you can bend it, put it in that clamp, bend it over like that, and draw your plastic or whatever you have over the top of it, and you've got you a mini greenhouse. And I know people doing that because they can't afford a bigger home or house like this. And they are growing lettuce, and they're growing greens, and they're growing carrots and beets in these boxes all winter long. And when the weather changes, then you just go take the covering off, and then you're right back as if you're out in the ground. I mean, that's a cheap way of doing it. Now, not every one of us can, afford this. But you can afford, a grow box and grow boxes dedicated. My daughter lives in Alaska. Do you know what kind of climate zone they have up there? I wished I had pictures of what she does. This kid is amazing. Well, she's not a kid anymore, but my wife and I went up there and I helped Alina build these boxes. And she has a beautiful laid out garden, and she grows produce near year round up there. And she does that. She builds these little hoops over them. She grew up this fanatical hippie, and so she learned to be very practical. And so you can go out there in a good part of the winter up there, and you can see all this food growing in these beds. Now, I'm going to tell you something. If you got a will, you can do it. It's within your means. You can do it. Now, somebody had their hands up.
Yes. My question is, when you grow in a greenhouse or high tunnel or whatever you call them, what about pollination? Because when you grow out in the open, bees visit and the wind blows and whatnot, for pollination. And how does pollination work inside of these?
Okay. Now, you all heard her, right? Now, we're going to have to come back and do a whole workshop on greenhouse and high tunnel production. I can see that. No, you don't need to do any such thing. I don't import any bees in my house. I don't import nothing. All I do is in my house, you see this pole right here. This pole right here. That whole wall, that 100-foot wall rolls up. The same thing on the other side of that house, it rolls up. And I leave it every day. I open it up. And during the season where you need pollination, the bees come from everywhere. And they get inside there and they work my plants over. And by the time the day is over with, they're going home. God has got wild bees everywhere. You don't need domestic bees to do this. I've got little tiny bees that are about this big that come from I don't know where. But they're in there working. That when I'm up there, you'll see some pictures. When I'm up there picking or pruning, those little fellows are just having at it. And they don't bother me, and I don't bother them. Pollination is no problem. No, they won't bother you. Now, let's move on. There you see in one of those big tunnels the production level. Now, you don't have to do what I was doing in the sense of the amount, but you get the idea. Now, if I had the pictures and you saw this wall on the outside is all bell peppers. That's a bed. And those bell peppers, you see the tops of the stakes? Those bell peppers got up over the top of those stakes. We had bell peppers because of the fertility of the soil. And getting that soil super rich inside there, we had bell peppers that big around. And I raised all the different colors, is the rainbow colors of peppers. Everybody loves them. And if you build the soil right and you put the right components in there, man, those peppers, they just go wham, right upside your head when you bite them. Because the sugar content in these bell peppers are amazing. They just are good to eat like an apple. So that wall and the opposite wall over here where my bell peppers went on the walls, because they're not going to get super tall. They will get fairly tall. In another house that I don't have the pictures of anymore, it was the house that you saw that was right here, this house here, where you just see the edge of it, that house I raised eggplant in. I had eggplant 6 and 8 feet tall. I kid you not. You cannot believe 2 eggplants is all you would need in a high tunnel for all the eggplant you would ever eat in your life. I had eggplant in this house, and I kid you not, back in our country, people love eggplant. We raised various different varieties, and they always got a different variety every time they got a box of food from us. We had long, skinny ones and big bells and white ones and all kinds of little bitty round ones that are yay big, look like a baseball. But these plants love the environment in the house. And especially your nightshade plants, they thrive inside that kind of climate because they love heat. They're heat-loving plants. And if you want them to grow, build that soil and give them the right environment, and they will produce like you cannot believe. I plant in these, well, it depends again what we're growing actually. Eggplant, I usually put them in March. They go March. By late April, May, when we start our market in May, we're in full load. We're just, doing everything we do to stay above it. Now, I was going to mention to you, you can see here, these 2 pictures right here. That, as you see, and we could spend time, and this is for you because I don't know what you know and what you don't know. But there are techniques, and this is for all of you actually, because if you ever get into even a small high tunnel, if you had 4 to 5 tomato plants, you would have all the tomatoes you'll ever eat. Put up. If you'll follow these guidelines, you build that soil like we've been talking about. Get it up, get it strong, put your compost, get your minerals, you get your calcium, all those things in that ground. That is your base, that's your foundation. When you plant in that bed, you can see right there the bed that's right down underneath the tomatoes. Now in my house, I have tomatoes sitting planted just like this. And they go up and they're stringed up. You can kind of see the string along the edge there. They go up to a trellis line up here, up top. And they grow up at an angle like this down that row. And as they're growing, the tomatoes hang out here like this, as you can see. They're hanging out like this, so you're not having to dig in all back over in here, dealing with them because they want to fall out because your angle of your tomatoes. Now, in the process of growing those tomatoes in a high tunnel like this, you're not outside because you're not getting a super lot of wind and a lot of air cross ventilation. So we've learned to prune them properly, and what we call the proper pruning of that, and we could spend a whole session on pruning. You can see how naked that stem is right there. That's called the mother stalk. All the way up to the top of that roof. These plants are nearly 10 feet tall. And we were picking tomatoes all the way up as far as I could reach. And you'll see that here in a minute. And you have one parent stalk that grows up. Now, if you know tomato plants at all, you'll know that tomato plants grow up, and every time they have a stem that comes up like this, which is what you call your leaf, your umbrella, out of that stem and the mother stalk will come an offshoot. And that offshoot has got to be cut off. The sucker. That's exactly right. And it's named a sucker for a reason. It'll produce tomatoes, but it's going to take away from your main body of tomatoes. Your main body of tomatoes is what you see. We had pound tomatoes coming out of this house. And that's what I'm shooting for, is a nice big round, about a pound tomato. Now, as that plant goes up about every 16 inches, that plant is going to want to put another limb out. And it's going to put another offshoot, another sucker. That sucker, every 16 inches, has got to be taken off. And that leaves you with the parent stalk all the way up. Every time the 16 inches happens with this offshoot, comes a set of blossoms right down here. And every 16 inches, you will have a set of blossoms of 4 to 5 tomatoes. Get that one wrapped around your head. You get a tomato plant that's running you, let's say, just 8 feet tall. One plant at 5 tomatoes per section every 16 inches. A lot of tomato. All right, so now you can kind of see, and even on a smaller scale, what you can do, even if it's just 3, 4, 5 plants. You don't need large amounts. All you need to know is how to do it right, and you can actually produce more food for yourselves and others. And I've said this over and over again, and I'll say it again. Why grow it for your own selfish self? Why not grow a little extra, even if you sold a little extra? I don't care how old or young you are. People love good, fresh home food. And you can create a market whether you want to or not.
I want to circle back to that Quonset in your previous picture there. The one on the far left, I'm toying with one in my backyard. I went to a local farm supply store, and they have 16-foot fencing panels that you can bend over.
Yes.
In that,
we call them hog panels.
Well, hog panels, okay. And they work very well because they're 4 foot wide, and you can keep adding on to your little
yep, very
Quonset
good.
hut.
Very good.
Pretty reasonable.
Yes. I'm glad you brought that up. That's a good point. I hope you all understood what he was saying. These hog panels are 16 feet long, 4 foot tall. And I know folks that are doing it because if they can't afford something more like this, they can sure afford that. You can go down there to farm supply stores and they have them. Y'all are familiar with them, I think. And you can just bend that thing right over like that, and you have a nice little tunnel. And you can add to it every 4 feet. You can keep adding to it as long as you want. It's pretty amazing. Yes, it is. Okay, let's move on. There you see me pruning. I was pruning tomatoes, the very same tomatoes. And every day, or not every day, about twice a week, I was in the house pruning. At least twice a week, I'd go through all my plants. And in this house, I had about 500 tomato plants, which is more than you can imagine. And you can see the Christmas tree. You can see the tomatoes down there, right? Well, that's the same thing it did all the way to the roof of this house. And it was about 9, 10 feet tall. We had this kind of production of tomatoes, and we could sell every tomato we raised at $3 a pound. Get your head wrapped around what you can do. If you learn the art of doing it, it's amazing, and especially if you get in early. So I was pruning, and you can see me standing on these buckets. Those are 2.5 gallon buckets. I'm a kind of a short, little stocky dude. And it got to the point where I couldn't reach any higher. So I had these rubber clogs. They're called Gators, I believe. Crocs, there you go, Crocs. And I took these buckets and I put those Crocs on there and drilled through the bottom. In the bottom of the bucket, I put a piece of wood in there, and I drilled through the insole, down through the bucket into that, so I had at least another 10 inches where I could get up. So I was walking on these little buckets, and I was pruning, actually. You see all the trash down here on the walkway. I was pruning. It was kind of like stilts. I actually tried some stilts, and I could not stay up on them. And So, yeah, there's all kinds of ways of doing it. But I just want to let you see that you can see how tall these tomato plants are. Now, I'm going to tell you something. These tomato plants grew all the way until near frost. And these tomatoes were in the house in the month of March and went all the way. We harvested tomatoes almost to frost. All right? Now that's the present. I didn't realize we had to. Where I live now, that's our basic gardens, part of our garden spot, and that's the tunnel I have now.
What do you do to keep diseases out?
Oh, it's amazing, Melody. You know, if your soil is rich in a high tunnel, one of the reasons why I quit raising tomatoes and a lot of these nightshade-oriented plants in our country, especially because we have a very high humidity, and with high humidity comes the 1.5 million bugs per square inch, and we raise the bugs for the world, and the disease and everything can be really rampant. So I quit raising them. I went to the high tunnel production for that reason alone. And I do not have any disease in these houses. As long as you keep things under control and you keep them pruned, as you can see here, those tomatoes, you can see that pruning. As the tomatoes are ripening, you can see them as they're ripening up the plant. You just keep pruning and pruning. It's kind of funny looking after a number of months of these tomatoes. They look like a naked chicken sitting way up here with their legs way up here and a little bush up here. But they're all full of eggs all the way up. It's the funniest looking thing, but what it does is it keeps all the disease out, it keeps all the air flowing, and it keeps the environment in there in good shape, and all the energy that's going into your plant structure is all going into your fruit because you've got rid of all the excess foliage. And so disease, we never had, because I kept on top of where disease begins in a house like this is because you've got too much foliage and not enough airflow.
Yeah, I had a question. I think here, one of the challenges we've had is just starting later with the northern climate, but then also we got to build our soil more. But last year, our tomatoes, we got plants, about that high or so, and lots of tomatoes, but they were all green and they weren't ripening up even into October, and we didn't get any harvest basically until we picked them all green before the frost.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So any ideas for what to do to get them earlier or just to thrive better in a northern climate?
Well, you got to make it warmer. You just have to think warm. That's going to be a tough journey for you with that big old house out there, because you've got a crown on the top of that thing that thing's 20-something feet tall at the crown. You know where your heat's going to go. You got to have electricity out there, and you're going to have fans in that crown. And you're going to somehow going to have to bring some heat to that if you want, earlier production level. And you're going to have to blow the heat and keep that heat pushed down to your plants. Because that's why you see in my houses here how low key they are. I don't like those houses, and I'll just be honest with you, because there's too much crown, and you're not going to be growing food up in that crown. It's just the way it is, and I know you were doing the best y'all had with what you had, but it was because of, well, it's just because of ignorance. You're learning. When I started out, I had a horrible amount of a learning curve to go through. But to get away from that, you're going to have to put fans up here if you're going to bring some heat in there to push the heat down. You can do that as well, but that's not going to get the heat you're wanting for tomatoes. Yeah, and they're doing that as well. That's a whole nother headache. But yeah, you can definitely do that. Now,
Here I have it.
okay, Susan, I don't know who was first. Ladies before gentlemen.
Okay, well, I just wanted to say that my kids and I, we went to a garden class at a church with a gardener, supreme gardener, who's made gardens all over the world for people to survive and thrive and all over the world, missionary gardener. Anyway, we had garden class. We had 7 or 8 rows, and each one had a different fertilizing method. And we had the ag row, test the soil, say what they did to do. We had the average Joe row, the Miracle Grow row, those poor plants. We gave them food later in the season because they were just pathetic. And we had the Mittlighter gardening. We had seawater gardening, fertilizer. Anyway, I had all these rows. You could clearly walk into the garden because we all went once a week with the handouts and helped weed and could get whatever product. And we had the bricks meter for the, anyway, this is really awesome garden class. Well, I don't want to tell you guys this. You know the Ellen White method of planting a fruit tree? So we planted 2 tomato plants, the Ellen White way of planting a fruit tree. 3 feet by 3 feet, the topsoil on the bottom, the piece of pipe in there for air, the the layered of gravel and then mulch and then gravel and the rock under the roots and all that. Those 2 tomato plants, which were 100% donated, the fruit to community services.
Yeah.
We weighed all the tomatoes from there. Nobody could take any of those home because we wanted to see how much they would produce. Each plant produced over 200 pounds of tomatoes per plant in one season.
That's good stuff.
And the average tomato plant will produce between 5 and up to 18 pounds per plant. 18 would be really high. 220 pounds of tomato on one plant, and all the plants were the same in the garden. And that is an amazing, I saw that with my own eyes.
Yeah.
One plant, 220 pounds in a season, one plant. Planted the Ellen White fruit tree way.
Yep.
So if you don't have a lot of room, if you got it 3 feet by 3 feet per plant, you're going to freak out. It's really awesome.
Another thing, thank you, Susan. Go ahead.
About 4 years ago, where we live up in North Idaho, we're about an hour north of Coeur d'Alene, we had been using a wood stove, and we have a barn dominium style home.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
And we were burning about 7 cords of wood a winter and not really feeling like it was adequate. And I started exploring the rocket mass heater concept and put one in 4 years ago. And it was a lot of work, and there isn't a kit really that you can buy. You've got to do some research and figure out a way to build it.
Yeah.
Put it in, and I went down to 2.5 cords from 7 cords of wood a winter. And since then, in my solar business, I've had 2 clients that have put in rocket mass heaters in their greenhouses, one of whom had tried to put in 2 of them and had never had any luck. I helped him rebuild it differently, and it works amazing in a greenhouse. So for heat, that's something you could consider.
Well, you all need to get somebody. I know I'm amazed. Y'all have definitely an interest in the high tunnel production. I did not quite prepare for that. But it is, I mean, it is, for me, it is the way to go. I mean, if you're really going to want to get into growing food year-round, high tunnel production is absolute must. It really works. And there's all kinds of techniques, and that is a super good input there. So anyways, yeah, I would say at least give yourself, I'm going to move through these things because we could always come back, I guess, and deal with some more of it. There's in one of our houses the carrots that we were harvesting. There's that's in this little house right here. And those carrots and that right there is right now what's growing in our little high tunnel right now, and what we have in production for our own use. I mean, I feel like I'm playing from what I used to do, but the beds that are right here are being prepared right now for our tomatoes and peppers and stuff like that. But on the walls here and over on this wall here, which I don't have a picture of this wall over here, I don't believe, we have beets and various other things on that wall over there because they stay down a little lower. But this is kale and chard, and I think there's broccoli and cabbage, and there's a number of other things coming on down through here. Now you can see that same picture, but it's more up. And you can see how healthy these plants look. Once you start getting that soil to working for you really well, it'll really start, I mean, those plants just thrive in it. You can see with those tomato plants. There was something I wanted to mention to you before I get too far down the road. If you get into, which I know you are, and I don't know if anybody else is in here, but at least for your own production, they have what's called an injector system. Now, if you're not familiar with it, look it up. But in these greenhouses, they have what's called an injector. And if you know anything about plant, it's just like a human in a sense. But in plants, when you start seeing these plants starting to bloom, put on their blossoms, like the tomatoes or your bell peppers, I actually do cantaloupe in a house, strung up. I do cucumbers strung up the exact same way, and they're standing up just loaded with cucumbers. I just don't have the pictures of them here, but it's the same idea and same technique. And when they start blooming and they're putting on their little bitty, let's say tomato, I start injecting these plants because at that stage, the plant is at its highest peak of hormone production. If the hormone production of that plant drops, disease ends up happening. And everybody starts losing production because they don't realize those plants are in high demand for nutrients, just like a mother producing a child. If she's not feeding herself right, she's not feeding the child right. And that's the way it is. Okay. I get from Neptune. You can get it in a 5-gallon back there. There's a company. When I was in business like this, I got it in 55-gallon drums. But you can get it in a 5-gallon drum or bucket. And it's a concentrated form, so it would probably do everything you want, just a 5-gallon, but it's through Neptune, and I think Amazon actually carries it. What it is, it's a mixture of fish and kelp in a liquid form. And I also get from another company a liquid calcium. It's an organic calcium. And I mix it in a 5-gallon bucket. It's so many ounces, like 2 ounces per gallon of this mixture, of this combination. And then this injector goes on the wall. And of course, you saw in this picture, underneath this plastic are drip lines, just like I have out in the field. And right down at the end of this row is that injector system, and it goes into these drip line, and it drips right on the plant, this fish, kelp, and calcium. And at the highest form of its development, I keep at least once to twice a week injecting these plants with this material, and these plants just keep thriving and they look beautiful all the way through their growth because their hormones, as you can see, they're laying off a lot of babies there. And every one of those have got to have extra boost. Otherwise, it's going to take it from the plant to try to make itself be what it's supposed to be. When it's starting to flower and you start seeing those flowers developing and you start to see those little bitty tomatoes, peppers do the same thing, cucumbers do it, right on down through these vine type of plants. When they start setting, you start injecting it. And you keep at least once to twice a week injecting these plants with that combination, and you will see these plants just keep getting better and better and better. You keep them pruned right, you take care of them right, and those plants, I don't care what you're growing, we do the same thing with other plants in our houses. Bell peppers, as I was showing you over here, I do the exact same thing to the bell peppers, and I'm telling you, we get bell peppers, as I was telling you earlier, like that. Beautiful, gorgeous, organic, non-chemical. I never spray inside this house ever. So there's no poisons. You can go in there and eat anything at any time when it's in production. Inject? No, I inject twice a week through the season. Through the season.
Do you cut the heads off your peppers to stimulate them?
When they get up here at the top of that stake, I prune them off. And in fact, I do very similar to the peppers as I do to the tomatoes. Peppers will do the same thing. They will sucker. And so I take a number of the suckers off. It's a lot of work. If you've raised cucumbers before, you can raise in a small house two cucumber plants. I raise about 5, because we like to put cukes up, and we eat a lot of cucumbers anyway. I have about 5 or 8 cucumber plants. And in this house right here, which I don't have the picture of it here, but right over here, these are 2 rows of tomatoes, 2 beds, I should say. There's 4 rows there. The next bed over were cucumbers. There was like 200 cucumber plants in here. We had cucumber plants as tall as these tomato plants, and they were loaded like a Christmas tree. Well, there's a whole art to it. But you see on these pictures, you see the string right there? It's a little white string. Can you all see it? Now, on that string, you see the little black clips? Those little black clips actually hug around where there's a stem that comes out and that sucker comes forward. That clip goes over and it has like a jaw that it clips and squeezes around your string. Kind of like a hair clip. And as your plant is growing up, it sets its weight down with these tomatoes down here. On that limb that was here that you pruned off, you leave a stub, and that black clip is actually holding that plant up as it sets down. You can kind of see it where the plants are wanting to crotch a little like that. But all that weight is laying on those little clips. Now, that's the method I use because I found it to be the strongest. A lot of plants, you can do it with a string just wrapping it around. But a lot of times that string will loosen up and your plant will go, ooh, ooh, as the weight gets more and more.
If anyone wants to see what that looks like, I have some across the way later when I give a tour. But really quick, so the injecting the fish and kelp, that boosts the fertility, like the nitrogen and the giving them an extra boost. And then the calcium, that prevents the blossom end rot, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Well, I don't have blossom end rot because I deal with the soil first.
Mm-hmm.
That's your number one. That's your foundation. The only reason why I put kelp and calcium together with the fish is what helps stimulate its growth. You know, it's got that nitrogen, it's got all kinds of other goodies in it. But it's the kelp and the calcium that are actually, when you study these minerals, these products that kelp has many things in, those are the building blocks to build healthy, strong plants.
Okay.
Not for growth, but for good, strong inner core, their immune system, if you please. Mm-hmm. It's what helps stimulate the hormones in the plant's life to make them stronger.
Okay.
And calcium is known as the knitter. It knits, and it's a very strong fiber and a very strong, healthy plant. So there's just a lot of different
one more
things.
Thing. So you fertilize with that twice a week. So with your watering, do you normally do a deeper watering just like twice a week, or do you do lighter waterings for less time?
Depends on the season.
multiple
It
times?
depends on the time of your year. I usually try to irrigate in my house 3 times a week. All right. Every other day is pretty much what I did. And I don't like flooding my ground because the flooding creates mold and it creates disease. And I would run it usually for 2 hours every day or every other day. And 2 of those days, which were up at the front and up at the end, I injected that material into the soil. In the middle of that week, I did a deeper irrigation, yes.
And you don't want to do it too deep, or you'll end up washing all your nutrients
Yep.
and amendments that you added, and it'll just go way down in the soil where your plants can't get to
Of
them.
course, and I don't know what kind of system you're using, and I don't know what kind of irrigation drip line you're using, but the importance of having the drip system in there, I use a drip system that has every 6 inches a port. It's in the line. There's like 8,500 running feet in the roll I get. Okay, I don't like the foot, but that's just my preference because I have found for myself, I can water less in time. I can water more on less time with a 6-inch drip. That 6-inch drip actually covers, and you'll see once you get into it, when you start pulling these plants out of the ground, you're going to see a difference between the 6-inch irrigation system versus a foot, because you have to go longer to get it to spread across your ground. And if you're closer together, you spread across the ground twice as fast.
It takes about 4 hours for the hose to...
I did it 2 hours. 2 hours is what I'd irrigate with. And it was sufficient and plenty because I went to the 6-inch. I recommend right off the top, at least for that kind of production, is a 6-inch drip line. Okay.
With your plant starts, do you start from seed directly inside your
Nope.
greenhouse?
No. Because I was in such a production level, I really didn't have time to plant or get my own plants. So I had a contract with a Mennonite company that was not far away that would grow all my plants for me. And I had them on a schedule every 2 weeks from all my plants, whether it was whatever. Most of my lettuces, we raised 2,000 to 3,000 head lettuces. And that was every 2 weeks, you know. And so every 2 weeks, I was getting up to 1,000 to 2,000 plants. So you can see what we were doing. It was quite intense. And so I recommend, if you have the energy, get you a separate little house to grow your own plants, because that's what it's going to take. That's right. And otherwise, you're going to have to find somebody. And I always liked it. I'm just kind of community minded. I like to support somebody else as much as I like them to support me. And so I went to them and asked them if they would, and it was a real good income for them, to say the least. But that's okay. I needed tax write-offs.
I just wanted to say that to support my tomato plants, and my father-in-law started them from seeds from Russia, from great-grandpa's seeds, and so he gave me plants, so he just started them. What I used, because my plants grew really high, is I had like 10-foot field fence posts.
Oh, yeah.
And I put the cattle panels on them, but I didn't put them near the ground because the plants are fine when
Right.
they're small. And so I put them like the cattle panels like
Yep.
this far up when you start tying them. And then they're tall. And then because of my very busy life and a million other things, when I had to tie the plants up, I had them all on one side of the cattle panels, and I used zip ties from Home Depot. Zip, 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 zip.
Yeah, they work
And-
great.
And at the end of the season, we had the kids go in with the scissors and cut all those zip ties off, and We did it again the next year. So
Yep.
they were super strong
Yep.
supported, zip ties to tie them up, and they got to be, I don't know, like 8, 10 feet high, 12 feet
Yep,
high.
yep, yep.
So that was easy
You
and
need to take
strong.
advantage of Susan. You all got the experience, so you need to share with these people more. Okay, now I guess we're going to have to come back tomorrow and we'll work through the rest of this because, you know, it's like I told my wife, a picture is more than 1,000 words. And you can see, and, you know, if you can just get your mind wrapped around shrinking this thing up for your own use, the amount of food you can grow for yourselves and for your neighbors, you know, because I think the time is fast upon us that we're going to be having people come to our door because they don't have the means or the how or the know-how to do. So, you know, anyways, we'll come back and we'll work through some of the rest of the pictures. I'm listening.
Testing. Okay, there we go.
Yeah, so I guess just to kind of maybe next time to give us an idea of which plants that you would plant every 2 weeks and which ones you don't, because like you wouldn't need to plant tomatoes every 2 weeks, right? Because
No.
they keep growing through the season. So to kind of give us an idea of that kind of thing would be helpful.
Well, you remind me when we come back and I will address that, okay?
Thank you.
And we'll work through that. So we'll come back and we'll look at a few more pictures and try to wrap some of these things up here. All right, let's close. If anybody has anything else they'd like to share or ask or whatever, if not, we'll close. All right? I shouldn't have said that.
I had, you know, I fought gophers for so long and just horrible, you know, gophers. I finally gave up and I built some raised beds. And so to use the space as efficiently as possible, I did vertical gardening. And so I just took old field fence, 4-foot
Yeah.
field fence from on my property, put posts on the side of the, 4-foot, 6-foot posts on the side of the raised beds, and just made an arch with my field fence. And of course, I used my zip ties. And then I planted the plants on the outside of that fence, and I grew cantaloupes because
Oh,
you
yeah.
know you can hang all
Oh, yeah.
these different fruits because as they get more weight, their stem gets stronger if
Absolutely.
it needs it. Cantaloupes and butternut squash and acorn squash and zucchini and then I had another archway with cucumbers, and I just had 5 on each side, and they grew all the way up to the top and all the
Yeah.
way down to the bottom, and I trained them to come into the shade, and vertical gardening was really, really cool.
Well, that's kind
Really
of what
cheap
you
and
see
really cool.
in the house. Now, you can do a lot of this for summer production on the outside of a greenhouse, like you're saying. And I know a lot of people for garden use that are doing it. It's great because instead of taking your vines and getting all over the place, it's going right up. Yeah. Well, the nice thing of it is, and you know that by experience, if they're growing up, they're not getting the sickness that's laying down there on the ground. That's exactly right. So there is a lot, there's a lot of things that you can learn to do, and we're just kind of hitting some of them to encourage y'all. But you can grow a lot of food in a little bit of space, and that's what it's really all about. Okay, let's close. Father in heaven, we thank you for this time. We ask that you would continue to stimulate our minds to put into action the things we're learning. Again, thank you for this day, and thank you for life. And keep us now, I pray, and thank you. Amen.